Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome. Here we are. We're going to learn a continuation of what we've been learning. This is going to be class number 4 in what we've been learning, this Purim discourse from the Mittler Rebbe, the son of the Alter Rebbe. It's a commentary on his father's discourse, and of course with his own style and his own boundless depth. We are holding chapter 12 in this mimer, in this discourse, and I'm probably going to spend this week and next week, one more week, learning this mimer. This is on page Nun Ches, which would mean in the book Sharei Orah, it would be page 115. That means the page before that is 114, the page after that is 115, and this has the Hebrew number on it, Nun Ches. And here we are. As I mentioned, this discourse has, I think, over 90 chapters, and we've been learning only 11 chapters in the last 4 weeks, 3 weeks, spending already about 10 hours. So to finish the whole discourse will probably take us another 30 hours. Let's see how long we can stick with this, how far we'll go. So last week the main discussion was the reason why both Megillas Esther, the scroll of Esther, and the holiday of Purim, along with the laws of the Torah, are not going to be canceled when Mashiach comes. It says that all the prophets will be canceled, and he explained last week it doesn't mean cancellation of prophecy. On the contrary, prophecy is going to be so much more when Mashiach comes. It means that since prophecy is a divine ray, it's a revelation of of godliness, and when God himself is going to be revealed, godliness is not going to be a big deal. That's what we were learning. So why is Megillas Esther going to be, it's like if you go into the sun itself, you don't get so excited about sun rays, because you're seeing the sun itself. So why is Megillas Esther then going to be a big deal? And why are the laws of the Torah, the laws, halacha? What does halacha mean? Halacha means the physical application of Torah to this world. That's halacha, in which it gives you the final, after all the back and forth and logical discussions, disputes, and various assumptions, and so on and so forth, when you finally come to a clear clarification on the actual law itself of how we are to behave in terms of mitzvah observance, which is all the part of Torah called the halacha, all those halachas will not be canceled when Mashiach comes, because they too are of the essence of God. That's what, Megillas Esther, he explained, and the laws of Torah, they are stemming not from Hashem's light, but from Hashem himself. And to understand all of this, you can listen to 3 classes. I'm not going to go over them. And we spent about 10 hours or 9 hours, over 9 hours discussing this. So let's already dive right in. So last week he explained, we started getting into the concept of halacha. It connects, actually, it's very, very relevant to us right now, because we're just yesterday started learning the new cycle of Rambam. The Rambam's Mishnah Torah, Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, is, if you want to learn the halacha of Torah, of the entire Torah, you want to know all the halacha, join a Rambam study program. Then you get to learn the entire halacha. So that's never going to be canceled. And we learned last week that is Mordechai. There is Esther and there's Mordechai. So we learned that Esther has to do the scroll of Esther and everything related to Esther, Esther herself, and the scroll of her story, and the writings of the Torah describing that story, which is the scroll, the Megillas Esther, is emanating from a place that even when Mashiach will be revealed and the concealed world will drop down into revelation, we learned last week, after much discussion, we got to a point where we understood that the Esther is concealed even from the revelation that's going to be revealed when Mashiach comes. It's going to be mysterious even in the days of Mashiach. Because when Mashiach comes, in the days of, in the Messianic age, everything that is concealed will be revealed. The concealed worlds will become revealed. Amar bayoimahu, that day, remember what we learned last week? Bayoimahu means that day. That day means the concealed day. That means the hidden higher worlds. That day, Hine Elokeinu Zeh, we're going to point with our finger and say, this is it. Which means the hidden world will be revealed. The worlds of angels, the worlds of souls, all the mysterious levels of existence are going to become tangible, are going to become completely conspicuous and revealed to us. However, Esther, she is so elusive that she is hidden. Vanoichi astir panai, I will hide my face, even from Bayoimahu. That was his final interpretation. Even from that lofty level called Bayoimahu, which is the concealed worlds, it's hidden even from the hidden. As you referred to it last week, stima de kol stimen, the concealed of all concealments. And therefore, even when the concealed worlds will become revealed, we will still wonder about Esther. And when we will experience Purim and the Esther lights will come forth, it will be stimulating, exciting, it will catch our attention and reason to celebrate. Now, Mordechai is also someone not to dismiss, because if he is the one who is working with Esther, it must be that he's on par with her. And he is. What is Mordechai? We discussed. Mordechai is related to the laws of besides him being a person, but he also personifies the laws of the Torah. What was the connection of Mordechai, the laws of the Torah? The sages, just like they ask regarding Esther, Esther min Torah minayin, where do we know Esther from the Torah? The sages also ask regarding Mordechai, where do we know Mordechai from the Torah? Where do we find Mordechai in the 5 books of Moshe? The sages are coming from the assumption, which is not just the assumption, but from the place, from the truth, that everything that happens in all of history and especially all miracles and so on and so forth, must be contained and hidden already and stated in a hidden way in the Torah. So we explore where are they in the Chumash. So the sages say, Mordechai, they find that by the spices which are used for the ketores, which is the incense that is burnt, so daily in the temple, which was a blend of spices. One of the spices is called Mordechai, which means wild mor. And the Targum, the Targum Onkelos, who was a convert, a Roman convert, who converted, and he wrote a commentary on the Torah in Aramaic. And in his Aramaic commentary, he translates on the word Mordechai, which is one of the spices of the Ketores, he translates it Mira Dachya. More is Mira, same kind of word. Aramaic is pretty close to Hebrew. But instead of the word Deroyer, which means usually wild, he translates it to the word Dachya, pure more. But so the sages take a look at these two words, Mira Dachya, and they say, oh, that's Mordechai. When you take these two words together, you hear the sounds, the syllables of Mordechai. And that's where Mordechai is hidden in the Torah. He's hiding in the spices. So, last week he explained that these spices is a lot of times used for perfumed oil. Not only a lot of times, actually in the Torah it's used. Because one of the times the Torah says you should take Mordechai is when they made, besides the Ketores, they also made the the anointing oil, which was just yesterday's Chumash. When Moshe is told to anoint Aaron, the high priest, and the Mishkan, he uses a special perfumed oil. And that oil is made up of this mira dachya, of this murderer. So we went on to explain that Mor also means bitter, from the word mar. Dachya means pure. So Mordechai stands for pure bitterness. And what's this pure bitterness? A bitterness that comes from a very pure place. So he explained that is the laws of the Torah. Because the laws of the Torah lower themselves down into a very bitter space. Because they come into the world and for the duration of time that our world needs rectification, the Torah, the law of the Torah becomes like the broomstick. It mops up the garbage and it separates the good from the bad. And because the Torah has to lower itself down into a place full of klipa, full of unholiness, full of negativity, full of lies, full of deception, full of impurities, full of meander its way through these channels and select what's good, what's bad in these very dark places. That's what the Torah does. For that reason, it's called bitter. But it's pure because the ability for the Torah to do that is because it stems from Chachma, from the highest levels of Chachma. And as he explained earlier, it comes from the pre-conscious Chachma. It doesn't even come from the Chachma, from the revealed Chachma of God. It comes from the pre-conscious Chachma. Chachma Stima, from the closed Chachma. Chachma all the way up in Keter, the highest elements of Chachma. And that's the power to be able to do the birur, to be able to do the purification down here below. And that's not all aspects of Torah. That's the most grounded part of Torah. Torah as it reaches the interaction with the most physical, earthy, and lowest plane. And that's also the reason why it's called halacha, from the word halichos. Halacha means a pathway. Because in the halacha paves a pathway for God himself to go just like the king's road. When the king travels, it's not like his rays, his emanations, his ideas. He projects his lights, his influence on the road. The road is not meant for him to project his influence. The king's road is the place where the king himself comes when he travels, and when he travels, his entire being moves from point A to point B. So here's where we're saying that in halacha, God himself, from the highest, deepest self, and only he can lower himself down so low to do this separation that is done. So if you want to touch the deepest and highest, most sublime, most essential, most quintessential parts of the Torah, you gotta study the Torah in its most tangible, earthy, physical manifestation. When you study the Torah in its more elegant garments, when you study the Torah in its more spiritual garments, when you study Kabbalah, mysticism, and all that, which is very, very important to study, because or else we don't have a clue what's going on. So we need to study that. But in those studies itself, you don't get to touch the essence. To touch the essence, you got to learn halacha. That's why we learned that when a soul comes to heaven, they say to the soul, fortunate is the one who gets here and has a lot of Talmudai, his Talmud. Which Talmud? The laws of Torah. You studied Torah law down here in the world, Mishnah, Gemara, but primarily halacha, whether Shulchan Aruch or Rambam or the like, and you know it, you have it down pat. Oh, those souls get to experience the highest godly pleasures in Gan Eden. Because in the higher realms, why? Because they have Gan Eden, the Gan Eden is the rays of God light. But God's rays come from God himself. How do you have God himself? How do you connect to Hashem himself, not just to his rays? To connect to the Eibishter himself, you need to do what? You need to study the halacha, because that's where God himself travels. And that's why it says in Megillah Esther, we learned last week, 6 months the girls that would come see the king, the women that would come see the king, 6 months they would get treatments with Shemen Hamor, with the more oil, and 6 months they would be treated with Besamim. So he explained, 6 months, it means a period of time where they need to soak up this oil of halacha, spiced oil, which you only get in halacha, in Torah study of law. 6 months in the fragrant spices, that's Chassidus. That's Kabbalah, that's mysticism. And a soul needs both in order to have the ultimate rich experience of the otherworldly experiences. But you have to pick up the Torah only in its down here setting. In its incarnation, the Torah's incarnation in the physical world. That's what we learned last. And now, so what do we see from here? That both Mordechai and Esther, which means the holiday of Purim, and the laws of Torah, which this year they were connected because we finished Rambam a day after Purim. So we had 3 days of connecting to the essence. We had Purim, we had Shushan Purim, and then we had the Siyum Rambam. No one made that connection. 3 days of connecting to the essence of God. Because God is because both in Purim and in everything related to Purim, that's when we're touching the essence. And also in the laws of the Torah. That's the highest of the high. And that's why Mordechai and Esther are going to be present when Mashiach comes. And they're going to be somebody to look at. Oh, a lot of others are going to be, okay, prophets, high prophet. It's not going to be a big deal because it's going to be so much more than prophet. But Mordechai and Esther and whatever they represent, and Mordechai representing the laws of the Torah, you learn Rambam. Oh, that's special. That's like, wow. Because that's touching on what's higher than light. That's the ready then. So the question, however, he asked, but how? That doesn't make any sense. In the days of Mashiach, when we're not going to need halacha anymore. Because the whole study of halacha is to do what? Is to separate good and bad. But once the world is already rectified, was the last question we learned, then it seems like it would be why are we saying that the halacha is then going to be important? It's still going to be something when it's going to be totally, it's not going to have an application anymore. It's already, it fulfilled what it needed to do. And once there's no more evil in the world, and there's no more deception in the world, and there's no more lying in the world, and there's no more mixture of good and bad, so why is it necessary even? So that's what he's going to explain over here. So in Perek Yud Beis, chapter 12, he says like this. We have to preface three metaphors. We're going to use 3 metaphors to explain the gewaldigkeit, the awesomeness of the laws of Torah. And why one cannot just satisfy themselves with mysticism. But you need to get down to the meat and potatoes of the Torah. Then he gives three examples, which each one bring out the main theme, the same theme. And I'm sure obviously if he's bringing 3, is because each one, in other words, one can learn this superficially, and it seems like the 3 are the exact same idea, which they are. But I'm sure if we think very deeply in them, we will see that each one is slightly different and bring out another idea. But let's first see what his examples are. One of them is the example of a great and powerful blazing fire. A really big avuka. Avuka means a big flame. That's an avuka. Avuka is a big flame. Sheme'ira l'marachik. This massive big flame, what happens to a massive big flame? Sheme'ira l'marachik. It casts its light to a very distant place. Shekol sha'avuka gedolei yoser. Wherever as much as the avuka, as much as this torch or this big flame is greater, Torah l'marachik yoser. It will shine to a greater distance. So a small light, a little flame will illuminate and shine close by. A larger fire can light up even farther. And when you have an avuka gedola, a huge, big lantern with a big flaming fire, a flaming torch, a huge tiki torch, but a very big one, it can cast light for a distance. So an example for this would be, now he doesn't bring this example, it says on Simchas Beis HaShoeva, they would light huge torches during the festivities on Sukkot, and when they were dancing in the courtyard all the nights of Sukkot, they would light these huge lanterns. They would use the pants of the Kohanes that were already not usable. They would turn them into huge wicks, and they would light these big lanterns, and the light coming from Jerusalem was so bright that it lit up all the way to Jericho, all the way to Yericho. And I think it says over there that a woman was able to maybe separate or to sift out something, or maybe to knit. I'm not sure what Gemara says, something like that, from the light of Jerusalem of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. So it was because it was such bright lights, it went very far. That's a simple idea. The brighter a light, the farther the light will go. Okay. Now, now let's imagine Jericho. Jericho on the night, Yericho on the night of Simchas Beis HaShoeva. And they are enjoying the light coming all the way from Jerusalem. And they're astounded. They're saying, wow, look at the lights from Jerusalem. It's gewalt. And someone says, okay, it's nice, but I really want to see even better. So they'll bring their own lantern and put it on the table. The lantern that they're putting on the table, let's say someone is camping in a campsite. Campsite gets very dark at night. So you put a little, that's when you really appreciate a little lantern in the middle of the forest at night. You put down, besides for the mosquitoes coming when you put the light down. But in any case, you put the light down on the table, on the campsite, it makes a little light. Oh, now you add this lantern that you're bringing, because it's right over here, is casting stronger light than the light that's coming from there. Because that's, 30 miles away. It's a light that's 30 miles away, coming from 30 miles, looming up. So it's giving you illumination, but the weak illumination. If you're going to take a local light, the light I have right up over here, and turn it on, a local lantern, you get more light. However, the light that you're putting down on the table, this little flame or this little candle that you're lighting, although over here it's more beneficial because it's adding more light, it's giving you extra light, more luminance. However, it's not a big deal because it's shining from very close. The other light is coming from very, very, very far. And in terms of quality of the light, when you say quality, you mean in light, the power of the light, the rays of the light, the luminance that's coming from the lights shining from Jerusalem, which are 30, 40, 50 miles away, and yet the light is shining over here, although it's not that bright anymore because it's been weakened by the distance that it came, but it's this light, the quality is that it's coming from such a powerful light. So even though to your personal benefit, this might be more of a light, more luminance of the closer light, but when you want to be wowed, you're not wowed by the light of the. No one is going to describe the awesomeness of your candle that you put on the table or the lantern, because it's. But the big lanterns in Jerusalem, they can light all the way to Jericho. So even though by the time the light gets to Jericho, it's a little bit of light, but the fact that it's coming, its source is 30, 40, 50 miles away, and the fact that it was able to come, you know one thing, it must be really, really bright light. If its light can shine, it's very powerful light if it can come far. So what he's saying is that a light that it can illuminate at a very, very great distance is a sign on the power of the original light. The farther the light can shine, the higher the. So imagine if you had, imagine that you had between Jerusalem and Jericho, imagine if you had mileposts and you had various different lanterns throughout, from Jerusalem all the way to Jericho, various different lanterns. And, as you're traveling, let's not say, I'm trying to give an example where you can see that, where you'll have lights and okay, let's read it inside, because what I am trying to say is not any clearer than what I'm getting over here. So let's just stick in it over here. Let's see what he says. And even if he would light the lamp in this place, if in Jericho we would light the lamp, there would be more luminance than the light that is reaching it from a very far place. But nevertheless, when you want to get light to shine at a very great distance, you make a huge big fire, or you make a huge big flame, because this is such a big fire. Yagia or the light will arrive, even at a far distance. And even though the light that's going to arrive over there is going to be little, it's not going to be so bright, but it's coming from a very, very bright place, from a very, very high place. The very fact that it can shine to such a distance. This is this huge bright fire, a huge bonfire. A fire that's like a 10-story building. You set up so that fire can illuminate for miles and miles. That's giving off light to a very great distance. So what is this going to be an example? He's going to bring the example later that if you have the godly light that can shine all the way down to illuminate this lowly world, and to tell you and to figure and to shine light and clarification what's right and what's wrong, what's moral and what's not moral, what is corrupt, what is truth and what is deception, what is pure and what is impure, what is holy and what is profane. The fact that there is lights that can reach down here, although the light that is reaching down here that's entering into these spaces to purify is the light that you get by learning the revealed part of the Torah, because that's the revealed part of the Torah, the halacha part of the Torah. And it's not as bright as when you're reading Kabbalah, mysticism, the lights that are brighter. But the fact that this is godly light that is going down all the way here means that these lights are coming from such a powerful divine illumination. So high and so great that it can reach even this physical earth and sort out between what's good and what's not good. So the lights of Kabbalah that stay in the upper worlds are not coming from such a brightness like the lights of Halach. So although by the time it gets down here, it's a very, very small light compared to the bright lights of mysticism and so forth. That's why we like learning mysticism, because you get so much illumination, you get so much clarity, which you don't get when you're learning Halach. But the source from where the Halacha comes from is so high, that's why it can shine down all the way into this world. That's the idea. He's soon going to explain it, but this was the first example. Now he's going to give another metaphor for the idea. V'oid mashal sheni. Another example. You take a barrel and you fill the barrel up with water. Or you fill the barrel up with wine. A wine barrel. So you can fill the barrel up and the wine, whatever, halfway, 3/4. You can top it off to the top. And then sometimes, you put the hose there and you're putting it look, I guess there's an inlet and it's flowing in and you forgot to shut it on time. And the barrel gets, but because it's so packed, it's so stuffed with the liquid, and the pressure is there a lot, that it starts cracking through the barrel. And you'll see, like at the sides of the barrel, it's dripping. And it's not coming from the top, it's coming because it's finding the pores that are in the barrel. Usually, if the pressure inside of it would not be so intense, the barrel was the holes that might be there that are too small, it's kind of not coming through. But because this intense pressure, you'll see that the barrel is leaking in certain places. So even though what's leaking is only a tiny little bit of wine, or a little bit of oil, or a little bit of water, compared to what's in the barrel, it's only a little bit. But from the fact that it's leaking, that's an indication that the barrel is so full. In other words, if the barrel would not be full, then this leaking. So the leaking is actually an indication on the high density or the high, what would be the right word for it? The pressure that's there because it is so full. So what he's going to explain is that when the same is also in wisdom, when a person's mind gets filled with wisdom, and so as long as a person only speaks to their colleagues and friends or very chosen students, and they're sharing their thoughts, their ideas, that's like going to a barrel, opening the spout, and if you open a spout, every barrel will pour. And that's what a person does when they're filled with knowledge, and they share it to their colleagues, friends, teachers, students, and so forth. When a person is bursting with so much knowledge, so they'll spill a little bit of this knowledge when they're speaking to anybody. They're speaking to the janitor, there will be pearls of wisdom. They're speaking to the bellboy who's bringing their suitcase. They're going to share with him gems of wisdom. When they're talking, the two words conversation they have with the waiter, they'll also spill gems. In other words, when the barrel is leaking, that's a sign that this person is not just wise, this person is overspilling with wisdom. It's overflowing, that they're dropping pearls of wisdom even in their casual conversations. So you'll ask the question, can you compare the lesson that the teacher is teaching? Can you compare the lesson that the teacher is teaching to their students, to their little small little fragments of ideas that they're throwing out, not even thinking, that they're throwing out in all these unintentional encounters, or in these they're not intending to teach, but it's just coming from them. Obviously you can't, because what they're giving in a lecture, when they're preparing and they're thinking and they're premeditating and what they're going to teach, the teachings are so much more, they're richer than the little insight they're going to throw out in their brief unintentional encounters. However, even though the quality of it is much less, it's only a teacher who's bursting with wisdom, or a scholar, a wise man that's bursting with wisdom, that all of his regular everyday conversation is going to be is going to have so much content. So from what spills out from the barrel, the quality. What's spilling out and dropping out of the barrel is going to waste. But that's more than a barrel where you open up the spout and you're getting the wine. Although the wine you're getting from the other barrel is much more than this little bit of wine that's coming over here. Yeah, but this is coming from a barrel that's overflowing. So this is coming from a scholar who's dropping wisdom wherever they walk, because they're overflowing with knowledge. So it's a much higher level, even though the quantity and maybe quality is much less, but the quality is greater because it's coming not from a scholar, it's coming from a super scholar. It's coming from someone who's so filled with knowledge that they can't contain it. They're oozing, they're dripping with wealth, with rich ideas. That's the second example, and the example is going to be the part of the Torah that comes down seemingly, of divine wisdom, that comes down kind of in the waste of this world. In other words, where God is spending his wisdom to fix our problems, to fix the finite, limited. The Torah is the wisdom of an infinite being concerning infinite matters. The fact that the Torah is coming down to concern itself with our messed up world and to fix quarrels between people. This is like a barrel that's leaking little droplets. But the fact that the Torah is able to come down, even these little droplets, to deal with and to insert itself and to add insight and clarity into these tiny little insignificant finite areas, it can do the repairs, and these little repairs is a sign that the wisdom is so boundless that it spills down, it spills out of the barrel and comes down over here. That's a second example. So let's see. When you have a barrel that is very full, where the water goes out over all of its barriers, it breaks through, and you can see it's getting a little bit, is dripping at the bottom of the barrel. And definitely that which goes outside to waste, it's not important to the winemaker. He doesn't care if someone goes there and puts a little cup underneath to catch the leak and drinks it. Because he's not planning to sell it anyways. It's going to waste. It's hefker. It's like ownerless. V'gam atem, and it's also very little. L'gaba kol hamayim shebachavis, if you compare it to all the water that's inside the barrel. Makol makareim b'am l'chutz. However, it's precisely these little droplets that are leaking and protruding outside of the barrel. They're telling you the pressure level of the barrel. Because the barrel is so full, it became filled with excessive liquid, and therefore it's spilling out. So the same is also with a teacher and the students. A teacher, any teacher, has moments when they're more inspired, more enlightened, more their mind is open, and there's a gush of creative thinking. And there are times when there's a little, they get brain freeze. Things are kind of shut down a little. Fluctuations. How do you know when the teacher is like really, really pumping with ideas? When they're dropping drops, when they're leaking. When every little conversation you have from them, they're like, whew, like you blow, either like a little sign. Meaning it wasn't a class. It was a brief, half a minute encounter on the street, and you just stop to say hello, how are you? And in those 2 seconds, somehow he just drops a pearl of wisdom, an insight of life. And to the recipient, this can be life-changing. And this is nothing compared to a class and a lecture that is. But the fact that they're dropping these intelligent bombs, which let's say call it bombs, these intelligent nuggets, that's an indication of how full they are right now. They're not on empty, they're on full. That's the idea. So when God drops nuggets of wisdom down into our finite time and space world, these nuggets are an indication that the wisdom up there is really overflowing. When the teacher himself has become filled with wisdom and knowledge, and very, very full, until it goes out to waste, little droppings. The sages say that you should always listen into the casual talk of the rabbis, because even their casual talk has so much wisdom, so much to learn from. And they call it like a tree that gives fruit. But when a tree gives fruit, there's also the leaves that fall. Like it says in the first chapter of Psalms, regarding a scholar, regarding a godly man, it says va'olehu v'hoya ke'etz. It's like a tree, shasal al palgi mayim, that is planted by the streams of water, that are so great. Va'olehu lo yibol. What does that mean? And its leaves do not wither. Then the sages say it means even the sichos chulin, even the mundane talk of a great scholar, you can learn so much of how to live your life from these little, when they're not even meaning to teach anything. That's the point. Anything that comes out of their mouth, they're leaking pearls of wisdom. These are droppings from their wisdom, letalmidav, to his students. And even though they're just little droppings, and these little thoughts are considered not in comparison to the essence of the wisdom of the teacher that they're going to teach to their selected students, that are ready to, they were selected to enter their academy and teach them on the highest levels. These little nuggets are coming from the expansiveness of the maturity of their mind, of the depth of their mind. It's coming from such a high place. When their power has become, their power of understanding, of knowledge, is overflowing, more that they can hold they can contain in their vessels, in their brain vessels, moichai of their brain. That's why droplets are dripping out. That's the second example. So the first example was that the most powerful light is the one that reaches the farthest away. Second example is that the ideas that leak from the barrel are showing on the indication of like how full the barrel is, even though the light that is at a distance is very little light, and what's falling out of the barrel is very little water. But these are all the indications of that the source is very powerful. And the third example, in the power of procreation that is in the seminal droplet to procreate. We know that our minds as humans, they develop from when we're small. When we're born, a tiny little infant doesn't have too much intelligence. The mind is not that developed. As we grow from our infancy into our childhood, and then a little bit older, the mind develops. We develop our minds a lot. And we study, and obviously everybody different. Study, you grow, studying and learning and increasing one's mind, one's knowledge. The interesting thing, to be able to have a child, for a boy, a man, to be able to procreate, the law, according to Torah, the age is from 9 years old. Until 9 years old, the child doesn't have that ability to be able to produce the seminal drop that could fertilize, that can actually be used to create a child. Now, why is that? What's the maturity of the age? So we say that's because when you're creating a child, you're drawing from the seminal drop is really drawing from the mind. You're going to create a child. You're creating a copy of the parents are putting in the DNA of themselves into the child, and in order to photocopy yourself, you have to take from the brain cells. You have to take from your mind. And brain cells are physical, but there is also from the soul powers, and the highest soul powers are in the mind. So you have to kind of draw from the mind. And we say like this, that as long as the mind is immature, although the child, when he's 6 years old, 7 years old, can already figure out mathematical equations, say some have a pretty much of a bright understanding, but they don't have the ability to be able to produce from their mind what you might call a zip drive of their entire. Because what's really when you're procreating, you're gathering. Obviously, God made it as natural as it is. There's no great thinking over here, but the process is what's really doing is it's pulling. The body has the intelligence and the ability to be able to pull a scan, if you might say, a scan with the entire infrastructure, or the entire might say chemistry, on the makeup and the anatomy of who you are and what you are spiritually, physically, and it's all in that droplet. So to create that, there has to be a mature mind. And obviously, people that can be not mature till they're 60, 70, and then I still didn't grow up. Some people remain children all their lives. And then obviously there's, till you're at least your 20s, you're mature. But we see in Torah You're considered responsible for your actions by your girl when she's 12 and by your boy when he's 13. So you see that by 13 you have pretty serious mind development. So enough to be able to create this procreative droplet, the person needs to be at least 9 years old. But he asks a question. What's the question? The question is, the droplet that is coming from the brain, after all, is physical. And you can't compare it to the inside of a person's brilliance. A person is incredibly brilliant and they have incredible, powerful ideas. Yet the thermometer that will determine, the measuring will determine if their brain is developed or not developed, is if they can create a seminal drop. Why? Going back to the barrel. It's only when the barrel is completely full, that's when it can leak droplets outside. So the seminal drop would be considered like a droplet that is leaking outside. It's not of the higher quality. But to be able to create that, it can only come from an overflowing barrel. In other words, once the mind has developed enough that there is now obviously you're all gonna, obviously from a scientific point, one will argue and say that the most brilliant, that the A plus student who's doing fabulous whatever, and the Z minus student who had a cup for garnished, when it comes to creating children, doesn't make a difference, right? Yeah, but the child that's going to be created is probably also going to be not too bright. But the idea is, everybody in accordance to who they are, according to their capacity of what they can do, the indicator of a maturity of mind is not from the higher elements of the mind, but from the lowest element of the mind. From the mind being able to produce a seminal procreative drop that would be potent enough to create a child that can fertilize and the egg, or fertilize and bring about the production of a child. So let's see over here. So it's the same concept. It's the concept that even though we're dealing with something physical, the procreative drop is physical, but it's an indication. It can only be produced from a higher standard of mind, not from a lower mind. And the third example for this, from the power of growth that's in the drop. That in a little child, that is younger than 9 years old. This child does not have the power of being able to procreate, to create a child. And the reason is, because his mochin has not entered. That means the potential power of his soul to produce intelligence has not opened up yet. So has not entered into his vessels, the child's vessels. Achu ben tes v'yoser, until he is 9 years old and older. That's when the intelligence has already entered enough that it's called shleimus, that it has gone in b'shleimus into his head. Which in that level it is called moichen de gadlus. It's called expansive moichen ki yedua, as it is known. Az yuchal lahoylid. Then he's able to give birth. Ma moichen shaloi vlad. From his mind, he's able to produce a child. B'doimeloi. V'agam shavlad unimshach umishave. And even though the child is being drawn and come into being, the seminal drop that will create the child is being drawn, it's coming into being, not from the most sublime part of the mind, but from the leftovers. Moisre means from the excessive elements of the brain. In other words, you see the very fact that it becomes through going down the spine, it becomes a very physical substance. That's an indication that even in the mind, it's close to physicality. It's the lower element of the mind. What's going on over there? Maybe I made it too high. Maybe I made it way too high because I was turning it high. Yeah. Is it better now? Speak. Is it good now? How is it now? I'm speaking now. You know what? Because so many times it was too low, so I decided to turn it up all the way. Still scratchy? How about now? How about now? Yes. Sounds like a wire is loose. Okay, we're trying to figure out why. I thought so when it was calling. I thought this is. Everybody's on YouTube and no one has problems. I'm the only guy who has problems. Everybody's on YouTube. No one has problems. We got this fancy schmancy mic. We got this whole setup going on over here, and we have problems. Can you explain that to me? The Yetzer Hara, that's it. Other than that, it's coming from such a high power. Hello? Hello? Okay, I'm going to continue teaching now, and then hopefully it'll be fixed. But he'll come. Let's see if we'll fix it. In any case, V'yoyser, yeah. No, my son is coming, and he'll be working on it. We're going to learn meanwhile. The child is created from the leftover of the mochin, which means from the lower part of the mochin. This is what creates the droplet. Which is considered not in comparison to the essence of the mind. Nevertheless, the power of this droplet will not have the power to create a child. Only when it is so jam-packed ahead, meaning when the mochin have developed, when the mind has developed to such a degree, when the keli of the moach has reached a maturity and an ability to be sophisticated and developed, then the tail end of the head will produce what is needed to create a child. So even though we're dealing with the tail end of the head, but that tail is only producible, so to speak. That leftover of the mind is only producible when there is an overflowing, when there is an influx in the mind. She'az mekoyach gadol, from the great power shebe'etzem hamoichin, that's in the essence of the mind. Hiba, it comes. Al kain, and therefore yesh bekoyach lo hoiled oid b'doim aloi. That's why it can give birth. The person can create someone similar to himself. Mashen can koidim knisas hamoichin b'shleimus, which wouldn't be the case before the moichin enter in b'shleimus, in completion, before the mind is in its completed state. She'ein betipa yotzas koyach lo'ilid. I'm not sure a person can't have a intimacy, a child younger than 9, but they can't. It wouldn't have the ability to father a child. V'dai l'meivin, and it is enough to those who understand. Why? Because there's a lack of development enough in the mind to be able to produce. The intention of all these 3 examples, they all lead us to one idea. That when something in its essence, in the fulfillment, in its essential filling of itself, is very strong, when something is at its highest power and at its highest capacity, it can influence in a distance. That's the idea. It can influence either far away in terms of space, or outside of the barrel, instead of inside the barrel, it influences outside of the barrel. Or a person can create another child. A person outside of him who's going to have an extension of his mind. That's outside of you. So in order to go farther and go out, it comes from a higher place within. That's when the novlos, the droppings, are going to go very, very far. And even though down below the matter seems to be small, meaning, what is it? A droplet. What is it? What's coming from the barrel? The leaking from the barrel, nothing. The little light that's arriving over here is only a little bit of light. Yeah, but if the fact that there's light over here, it's coming from a very high place. But its root comes out from a much higher place. It comes from the essence of that power. In other words, every single thing has essence and it has expression. Expression is always contained, and the essence is always hidden. So usually every power doesn't reveal its essence. It reveals only it only emanates, it expresses. So when something is not umphing from its essence, it's just emanating from its, then it remains kind of close, or remains within certain borders. But when something gets when something opens up from its very essence, the potency is so strong, it spills over. So even though it's spilling over only in minor things, and that's what he's going to show. It's such a powerful example. When you're learning Torah, and the Torah that you're learning seems to be the Torah that we're learning seems to be very minutiae, very, very nitty-gritty, very, instead of learning expansive, abstract, philosophical ideas, life-changing ideas. You're learning how to build something or how to, right? It seems to be small things, but it's in those small little things where they're actually coming from the very essence of the Torah, which is the essence of God's wisdom, not his illumination, not his outside of the wisdom. That's the concept. And it's precisely from something that comes down, in a low level. Low, like an example of an avuka. Avuka means of a big blaze. In a ikkaredos goydel hashaleves, the main indication of goydel hashaleves, of the greatness of the blaze, the avuka of the avuka, which is the blaze. How can you measure how bright this light is if you don't have access to the light? If you have access to the light itself, good. You'll measure it by looking at the light. But if you don't have access to the light itself, then you can only measure how light it is by seeing how far it reaches. And if it reaches very far, you know it's a very high light, very bright light. Being that we don't have access to God himself, and we want to know, where certain things are ranking in the divine, in the godly, where are they coming from? So those illuminations of God that are reaching planet Earth and are of Earth and are applied to Earth and relating to Earth are the highest because they're coming from a higher place. And even though that as the farther it's going, the light is becoming less. This indicates the power of the expansion of this avuka, of this big blaze. And so it also in the second analogy. The chavis amaleya dafka, only a barrel that is so full, only such a barrel will leak. So if you're going through a cellar and you don't know which barrels are excessively full, how will you tell? Which barrels are like really, really filled? The way you can tell is to see where there's a little leaking taking place. Unless it's a defective barrel. But if you know the barrels were all good and suddenly you see, 2 or 3 of them are leaking, the pressure is too much. You overfilled them. Usually with a barrel, it's not a good thing. But with a person who's overflowing with knowledge, it's a good thing. It's only the little bit of water that's going to waste. Precisely with them, it's with them that you can recognize how full the barrel is. And also in this example, and here's the thing, in a barrel that is overflowing with, and therefore the pressure is high pressure. In that itself, there's gradations. The more, sometimes like in a tire in a car, there are certain tires that you overfill. You overfill it too much, it'll bust. Right? But you got to be careful. But sometimes you put a little too much pressure in a car and it doesn't bust, but still it's not good for the car. You have to have just the right amount of air pressure. So in a barrel, the more the barrel will be full, more and more, now it's better, more will go to waste. That's an indication of how much it has. That's why more of it is dripping. And then we get to the last example. The power of giving birth. What does it mean to give birth to a child? It's different than your own mind as you're teaching teachings or you're thinking thoughts. These are your thoughts. They're kind of remaining in the space of your world. When you're taking your brain and you're transplanting it into another human being, you're creating a whole new child, which means you're stepping out of yourself completely into a world of another human being, outside of yourself. You're disconnecting. All the other wisdom and knowledge you're giving is all a projection of yourself. But here you're taking kind of some of your mind and you're creating a whole new entity out of it. That is created from the essence of your mind. Only there can you go out so far, similar to the going out the distance of the light and so forth. When you're going to a different mohus, That's because there is so much pressure in the brain, and it's pushing min hamoach from the head. Because there is an overflowing pressure of the essence of the mochin, and actually it's related to the creation, the procreation, because procreation is developed through an experience that can only happen when there is obviously an intimacy between a man and a woman, but it involves a peaking of pleasure. And at the peak of pleasure, that's when there is the transmission of the seed to create the child. So the pleasure takes place in the brain. So you see that the pleasure, that there is a overstimulation of pleasure, which means an influx. That's when there is a transmission of the mind far away outside of the person, but to create a whole different person. Through the power of the pleasure. The brain became so full. Usually much more than what the brain usually handles. Therefore, this is what sends off from the bottom of the barrel, which is the droplet that creates the child. And even though the child is physical, which is created from a physical droplet, but this physical droplet, on the essence of how intense the moichen are, the mind is, it's very much. Because before you reach this age, when you don't have such ein moiled, you can't, because you don't have the capacity to fill your mind enough that it should spill over on the outside. It sounds a little strange, because it sounds like only brilliant people who are overflowing with their minds can have children, but it's not that way. It's and obviously it's even horses and cows and all animals. But even them, it's each one in accordance to, but they only create horses. They only create cows instead. So, but the concept is everybody in accordance to their capacity, when there's a certain maturity of development of their mind from the leftover of it, that's the idea, and from the influx and related to pleasure and so on and so forth, that increases the energy, it will extract from itself to the outside the most external element of it, but that's an indication of the advanced state that it's in. That's the idea. Mamish v'dai imkain, and therefore kol shemasha ba'adavar lamata b'akshama lamata yoser. So it comes out according to this: the more something materializes, more material and physical, this itself is an indication that it's coming from the root and from the source. It's coming from a very high place, more than what is usually in the mind. It's an influx, and that's what's creating the dilemma. So this 3 examples was the content of chapter 12. Now we go to chapter 13. Now he's going to bring it all back to God and to the preciousness of halacha. Why halacha is so powerful. Why the law of Torah is so powerful. And the derivative that we extrapolate from these three metaphors, we'll also be able to apply this to the law that deals with the physical, stemming from Chachmi, coming from the higher wisdom of God. Because in them is enclosed, and when we say in them, we mean in their most material and physical manifestation of the laws of the Torah. Because we know that every law of Torah can also be explained in the mystical, in the abstract, in the higher. Over there, you don't have this quality. This quality is only when you're studying the law in its most practical, tangible, down-to-earth application. Which will explain the reason why most Jews, when they studied Torah, are not into the abstract, philosophical, spiritual side. All yeshiva study throughout all the generations have always been occupied with studying Jewish law. And you'd wonder why. We're supposed to be a spiritual people. So why shouldn't we be more focused on the spiritual dynamics of the Torah? Yes, Hasidism brought that in. The last couple of hundred years, there was a great influx of the study of Kabbalah and all these mystical aspects, which is the study of the divine elements of the Torah. But yet, most of the study, even till today, I would probably say 80 to 90% of all Torah study in the world is all practical law, Talmud, and so on and so forth. And you study, Mishnah, Talmud. Betumah v'tahara, like studying the laws of ritual purity, ritual impurity, and ritual purity. Ukahagam and the like. Since the Torah is dealing with such dark places, it's getting into which dead insect carries an impurity, a dead rat, and which one doesn't. This is a lizard. How big does the size have to be of a dead lizard that if it's on a thing? How much of if you got a little piece of the sign of a bean, of a decomposed type of rodent. Then the Talmud has whole discussions. The Mishnah when it's how if it conveys impurity, if it doesn't convey impurity. It seems like it's dealing with very small and foreign and distant aspects. So for the fact that divine wisdom went down, went so far, to enclose itself, and to illuminate, even in material things, like matters of impure and pure. From this it's recognizable and understood. Boy, oh boy, is this coming from a holy place. It's coming, it's coming from such a high light, from even a very high place. This is like the way of, similar to this great blazing light, fire, or lantern, or flame, whose light can go so far. And even though at this great distance it's only a little bit of light, it's coming from, it's better. What is it? When did it started by him? Yeah, by him, yeah. Before when it went out.
Yeah, but now it's starting.
So weird. The wires are good attached. Is it supposed to have this light on air? Safe, I know. And any of the other lights, other buttons have to be pushed here? Did you speak to Yaakov? You didn't pick up, huh? Where's your son?
This one's flashing up there. Is that supposed to?
No, that's the internet. That's the internet.
Is it usually flash?
Yeah, that's flash. Very strange. Or maybe your son. Call him. What? Yeah, it's not going to be good.
Use the camera microphone and try that. We try that? We'll try the camera microphone.
Yeah? I don't think it'll be good.
I can get it. This is very scratchy.
Mom is scratchy?
Check all connections.
Okay, let's try the mic.
Computer mic is really bad.
Dude, I'll try the camera mic.
The camera's so far away.
We're closer.
Yeah. We're messing up. I don't know. Do whatever you think is better.
I come up with a whole new way. Better than the old way.
And even though at this great distance only a little light reaches, it's still coming from a much higher, much greater place. And the same is also true regarding the supernal wisdom that is mitzumtzum b'yosef, very, very, very little bit. By coming down, dealing with the silly things of this world. It's so minute. However, it's the power where it's coming from, it's stemming from the essence of the supernal wisdom that's in the essence of God Himself. Higher than God's wisdom that is expressed. The essential wisdom, it's like deeper than what can ever be expressed in the essentials. Better?
It's better. It's equity, but it's better.
That power is so much higher. It's not light. It's the luminary himself. It's like the pre-intelligence. Veloy oyer, not light. That's from that very deep place, that's where it's shining into. If it would not be coming from such a high place, it would not extend itself. And be drawn down from so high to so low, so much. And that's the reason why this is the only part of Torah that will not be canceled when Mashiach will come and the essence will be revealed. Because all the lights of Torah that we have, the higher lights are just lights. And then we're going to be having a more powerful light. But this is coming from not the light, but from the being, the source of light itself. It's not going to be canceled Kiziv HaShemesh B'Shemesh, like the ray of the sun in the sun. Ma'achar, since Shesharshayu B'Moyer Atzma, because its root is in the luminary himself. Va'alfapi, and even though She'imoya or Elyon Meir Ba'alach is Begilur Rav Yosef. And even if there would be, let's say you would be able to learn the halachos, and you would immediately be able to see the spiritual meaning of the laws. In other words, you would be able to law the halachos and see the godly, like the godly content of every halacha, which I love. Like, to be able to learn halacha kabbalistically. And there would be so much more light to it. That would not be beneficial. Because that would cause us to ignore the most material part of it. And it's in the most material part of it where of these laws, in its most physical, material application, where it's coming from a place higher than light. So if you're conceiving right away the spiritual content of the laws, if that's where your mind is going and looking at the laws immediately and getting the Kabbalistic associations, and then you're getting higher levels of light, but you're not touching the source of light. If that would be more, it would not compare at all in comparison to, yes, it's only a little bit of light that's hidden in the practical halach, in the practical law. But this is coming from the essence of the luminary. Even though by the time it's coming down here, it is so little, but it's little from a very high place. If you should because even the level that is the most nether, and the most contracted, that's coming from the substance of the luminary,
is much greater, without a comparison at all, than the whole small light. In other words, a little bit of light of this high, powerful light source is a much greater quality than even if you create a nice big fire close by. That is shining with a lot of revelation. Because this is shining from the source of light. It's called the ma'or, the source of the light. And then the light that's coming from the closer light, is only illumination. Hameir Bilvad, it's only from light, but not substance of essence. Niskala, as we said earlier, like we learned earlier, it brings in the parentheses. Even though he brought a statement from the Zohar that even a brilliant light is considered dark in front of God Himself. So even all the most spectacular lights in the higher world are only lights. And from there it's understood. The Gam Sodos HaKabbalah, even the secrets of the Kabbalistic secrets, that are called the secrets of the Torah, that don't come from the revealed Chachma, they come from the concealed Chachma, which is very high level. Which that Chachma Stima, the Chachma of Keter, is called brilliant light. Still, it's considered nothing compared to Keser of the Keser, where the laws come from. Even though this is such a brilliant light, and to the souls in heaven, they create such incredible pleasure for the souls. The souls are in ecstasy, like we said, the souls. The pleasure is so amazing that it's to die for. The Rav and Neshamas, and it's so much to these souls. It creates such exhilarating experiences for them. It still cannot compete in any way to the light and the revelation of Mitzvot that is contracted, but is of a quality that is off the charts. The Yoser beguf halachos, that which is in the body of the halach. If anything was an advertisement to join along and study Rambam now, this is it. Because it's coming from unimaginable high. It's the source of light. The comprehension of all the secrets of the Torah are luminance. And this is luminary itself. And this is coming from the big Kabbalists. And we're learning it in the book of mysticism. It's coming from the essence of the illuminator, which is called the cause of all causes. Even the most brilliant light, is considered nothing, and it's like rays of the sun while they're in the sun. The rays of the sun are nothing compared to the sun. And there's enough to those who understand. So this was the comparison to the first example of the small light and the lamp. Now he's going to take the idea and compare it now to the full cup, to the full barrel, and the droplets that are coming out when it's really overfull. And then he's going to explain how it applies above also to the child that can produce. Okay, and the same will also be understood according to the second analogy. When you have a barrel that's very, very full, and this color that we said earlier. The Torah that's revealed to us is called like noivlos, the droplets. It's the leaking. It's the wisdom of God that's leaking from the bottom of the barrel. That's our entire Torah. Even though it's a leaking that's coming at the bottom of the barrel, that's why it goes to waste Our entire world is a wasted world. To waste precious Torah on such a silly world of time and space, temporal existence, is literally a waste of divine wisdom. But yet, it's precisely there where you connect it to it. This is an indication of the root of the revelation of the light of this wisdom. In its source, it's because it became so overflowing up there that a little spills out. The power of Chachmillah, the supernal wisdom, has become so overflowing with brilliance and pleasure that some drops out. Till it can't contain itself and it spills into everything. It spills in even to areas where we're not ready for it. It still spills into that. L'chutz, outside. Like it says in a verse, that the wisdom goes out singing in the outside. Tarayna from the Lashon of singing, and I think it has another meaning, the word tarayna, which I forgot to look up. But the main point is chachma, the chachma bachutz, goes outside of its where you would say it's appropriate that it should be there. It's the chachma, which chachma goes outside. This is the wisdom of the revealed Torah. Revealed Torah, we mean the exoteric part of the Torah that deals with the material world. Which goes down into our world to clean the world, to separate good from evil. Birure Noga, to separate the birure means the sparks, the refinement of the glowing shell. Noga means the glowing shell, which is a mixture of good and bad, which really constitutes everything in our world, comes from the glowing shell. Lahavdol, to separate being tameh, between what's ritually impure, chulu. Ekiyadu, as it is known, shazeh simin bracha bebayis, and that's why it's a great sign of blessing in a house. Kasheyayin nishbach kamayim, when wine spills like wine. We know when wine spills out and it gets the tablecloth dirty, although the reaction of the woman of the house is to cringe a little, but the good reaction, the Jewish reaction, is to say Mazel Tov, just like when a glass breaks. Mazel Tov. It's all the same idea. When wine, the Talmud says that when wine spills like water, it's a good sign for the house. So last week Shabbos, by the Kiddush, when I made Kiddush, we usually fill up over here 3 cups, and then I make Kiddush, and then I pour into those cups, and then one of the cups goes to the women side, and then the people get Kiddush wine. So we filled it up, and someone reached for the thing, and bang, and he knocked over the whole thing. Fine. A few minutes later, someone else came, and he's got special reserve bourbon. And he doesn't give it to everybody, but he likes to take out his bourbon, and he likes to come to the rabbi and give him a nice cup of bourbon, and he puts it in front of me, and he says, oh, and I said, okay, fine. I went to wash for the bread. I came back, and the little kids, and Kalman was there. I'm not sure if it was Kalman, or it was my grandson, but between the two of them, they didn't drink it, but it knocked out. The amount of, we had the wine knocked down, we had the bourbon, everything was like nonstop. And then if you listen to my speech, you were in the end. But if you listen to my speech that came afterwards by the Kiddush, that's when I spilled all the beans. Because it was like when the bracha was like pouring out, it was like a great pouring out of everything. So that's the way it is. Things pour, that's when you're going to get like. Dafke, can you do as it is known? So why is it such a sign of blessing? Say, when you have full cups of wine, it's a sign of, wine is a blessing. It shows wealth, it shows, blessing. Wine is a blessing. So the wine should, why is the sign of a blessing when it's spilling? Why isn't it a sign of the blessing when you have full cups? The answer is, if you can afford to spill, it's just a lot of wine. That's why it's spilling. There's an influx, it's spilling. It means it's going out of the vessels. That's the whole idea. So what's the ultimate blessing is when God's wine spills out of the vessels and spills into places that are not vessels for it. And if it's God's wine, of course, its wisdom is going to fix the world. God says, oops, I spilled the Torah, and it cleans up the whole world. That's basically what it is. But the fact that it spilled is because there was too much there. The Chaim Chedesim Bracha, the Shefalav Atzim B'Yoysim Amayla, and that's the Siman Bracha as well, and a shown of tremendous shefa above. Kasher the Yayin the Eraisa, Helen Pnimius. But here he's giving another. When the secrets of Torah, which is the deepest secrets of Torah, Nishpach L'chutz, gets spilled out, Begilui, in a revealed way, Kemayim, like water, Levaded Berudim. To do that. Now, what does he mean by it? Does he mean that from time to time we also get not just the water of Torah, but we get the wines of Torah, which are the mystical teachings, which also spill out? Like the Mittel Rebbe, his entire thing is a gushing of secrets of Torah. Does he mean that, or does he mean that when these secrets, which are called the wine of Torah, find expression in halacha, in the water, reveal themselves as halacha, that's the ultimate indication of its ultimate heights. You can read this little line both ways over here. The dynamite. Zarushat Torah Nikra Mashal HaKadmoni. That's why the Torah is also called an ancient parable. The Torah is referred to as the ancient parable. There's a verse that says, Kasha Yomar Mashal HaKadmoni. Like it is said, the ancient parable said. Who is the ancient parable? Referring to the Torah. So you can understand that, meaning it's an it's an ancient book. But why is it called parable? Also, why? So the explanation is that the Torah that we are learning down here, which deal with elements of time and space, deal with elements of Gashmiut, of the material reality, all aspects of life. Is that why we learn Torah? We learn Torah because we want to connect to God. The answer is that the entire Torah is a metaphor for God. Metaphor. So which part of the Torah is the main metaphor? Where God is the most hidden. That's a metaphor. Where is God the most hidden? In the exoteric element of the Torah. Which means the part of the Torah that doesn't, where the subject matter is not God. The subject matter is the law. The legalities of so and so, of business and whatever it is. So there is where you're encountering the metaphor. That's called a metaphor. But who is it a metaphor for? It's not an ancient metaphor. It's a metaphor for the ancient one. And the ancient one is God himself. Because all the divine illuminations are not ancient. They started somewhere. An illumination, what is an illumination? Every illumination was once inside the luminary. So it has to start somewhere. An illumination, it's shown out whenever it shined out, whenever it was emanated. Every illumination of God, as great as it is, all the sephirot and worlds and attributes and whatever you want to call it, they're not called ancient. Because the real meaning of ancient is always was. Who is the only one who always was? That's God himself. God is the only true ancient. So when you're studying mysticism and you explore all this, even philosophy, whatever it is, the elements of Torah you're learning, you're dabbling in God's light, not in the ancient. But if you want to touch the ancient one, you have no access to it. You need to pick up the parable. Which parable? You got to learn the Rambam. You got to learn the law. Only in the law do you pick up. That's the parable for the ancient one, because that's the droplets that's pouring out at the bottom of the barrel. That's indicating on the essence. The parable for the ancient one. It's the wisdom of the ancient one who precedes the world. He enclosed himself and descended below. Into the metaphors. This is entering into the external element of the laws. For the reason that we spoke earlier, from what we understand from the three metaphors. Everything that in its essence is in its most potent, most powerful, most fullest state, its radiance will go down low. The inyan akshama biyosa will come down farther and farther from its source. Same as also, now remember the example that he gave from a barrel also has a more elegant application, where it's still a metaphor, but it's the same idea, but in a more psychological way. A barrel is a very physical example. But when we spoke about a teacher that has a lot of information, and when do they drop little nuggets of wisdom? Only when they're overflowing. When the preacher's a little dried up, then you have to really get a class from them to get something from going through. But when the delivery guy who delivers the groceries gets a nugget of wisdom, that's because the teacher is leaking. That's the idea. Like the example of what's dripping from a teacher to his students. When the teacher is very full with knowledge, from the greatness of the filling of the essence of his wisdom, but they're coming from a very high place. That would be similar to King Solomon, who was so overflowing with knowledge. He was the one who said the most metaphors, which means he was the one who said all kinds of riddles and all kinds of things. And his everyday talk, even the most casual conversation of King Solomon, you want to sit and analyze it for years. These are like the metaphors of King Solomon, who said 3,000 metaphors on everything. And Shalom the Rebbe Meir, and the metaphors that Rebbe Meir gave. Rebbe Meir was also the sage to say no one could compare to him in his knowledge. And he would give metaphors a lot about foxes. He would tell like folk tales, but in these tales there were like such deep secrets. And in these what might have looked like silly stories were contained more depth than the most brilliant teachings of the most brilliant teachers. And his little silly teachings, which looked silly, had more because it's coming from Meir's. It's like, if you have a little piece of unintentional and non-invested piece of art from an incredible artist, from Van Gogh, versus it was just he was a practice paper or something. It has more value. It costs more than a beautiful painting of somebody today who makes paintings. This might be far more, but this is the quality of who made it. Even though this is just a little scribble, a little whatever, but it's the scribble of. Or like people will give, pay $1,000 for a Rebbe dollar bill. Versus, I'm not gonna pay $1,000 if you're gonna give me a $500 bill. I'm not gonna do that. $500 is $1. So the quality, that's the idea. And the value of it is more than than even a teaching that has so much more visible light. And the same is with the water that falls from the full barrel. Yoser Chashuv has more chashivas, the mayim shabakais katan, than water that's in a small cup. I mean, that's like Since it came from a very big barrel, it's very chashuv of water. But because if you're measuring the size of where it came from, because they're coming from a high place. Let's go to the third analogy. And again, it's application to God. It's application to the Torah, to the physical Torah. And what is that? From the power of procreating. Was when the mind reached its most advanced maturity, then its little droppings end up becoming children. Little droppings of the head end up being a child. Give birth to a physical child. So that's the amazing thing. You know what the mitzvahs are? The mitzvahs are like, they're called, it's like God produced a child. Because how many mitzvahs are there? 248. That's what we did today around that. We learned the 248 positive commandments. Tomorrow we're going to go through the list of the 365 prohibitions. Together, the 248 and the 365 make up a human being who has 248 limbs and 365 blood vessels. So what is it? It's God's wisdom, the physical mitzvahs, not the spiritual dynamics. The physical mitzvahs is coming from God's brain, but it's like the seminal drop in which God creates the child, and the child is the Torah. It's a copy of. So even though it's physical mitzvahs and physical things, but it's stemming from where the seminal drop comes from the maturity and the essence of God's mind. The 248 commandments and the 248 limbs. The sharsham and their root is the chachma di Allah deraisa. They're coming from the supernal wisdom of Torah. The chachmi Allah nafkis, from the highest wisdom they're stemming. When does the wisdom of God have the power to produce this child, to produce this 248 commandments? The 248 limbs. Even though their physical incarnation of these is considered the moisterous, the leftovers, the excess of the supernal wisdom, it's rooted in the essence of God's wisdom. When it's the most full. That's why he gave birth to a child, which are the midos and the ivarim and the limbs. From ma, which is koach ma, the power of chachma, ma shem beno is created the name of his son. And like we know Torah is called man, so it's a carbon copy of God, so to speak. Just like a child is a copy of the Father. This is the Torah man. So you see, Torah is called man. And it's coming from the highest levels of Adam. It's even coming from beyond the level of Adam. It's called Adam. It's coming even from higher from Adam, from the essence. Meaning it's not coming from the Sphirot, which are called Adam. It's coming from the essence. That the gift of the Torah, matana, the gift of the Torah comes from the midbar. What's midbar? Midbar is a place where humans can't live. It's above Adam. It's a place of the essence. That's why God gave the Torah where? In the desert. Because the desert is beyond structure. It's higher. It's like the essence is beyond expression. And this is the great quality of the Jewish people receiving the Torah in its physical application, which is called the 248 limbs. Yoiser Mahasagas HaTorah, much greater than the comprehension of the Torah, Shehesigu HaAvos. And that's why our Torah is much greater than the Torah that our forefathers, the patriarchs, had. Because the patriarchs did not have physical mitzvahs. The patriarchs had Kabbalistic ideas. They studied a spiritual, mystical Torah. They did not have a concrete, and therefore their Torah stemmed from a much lower place. And our Torah, the more physical it is, it's coming from a higher, deeper place. Is higher than what the forefathers achieved and understood in the spiritual. Even though they are achieving the lights, they can see the brilliant light of God's wisdom, the divine wisdom. Because as high as it is in the light, it's only coming from the light, it's only come from the illumination, not from the illuminary itself. It doesn't touch the essence of the Ma'or. The source of the light of Chachmei. It's coming from Chachmei Allah, from the higher wisdom, but from the light of the higher wisdom, not from the substance of the higher wisdom. And even though Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had so much more illumination in their Torah was like, wow. There was so much divine light shining in their Torah. When Yaakov was playing around with the sticks there to make Lavan's sheep give birth to speckled and spotted, he was peeling sticks and making and doing. But we know that was the same avoda that we do with the tefillin. That's why it was stripes like tefillin we put around our head. So, but when he did it, the physical was an important thing. He was in deep meditative state, plugging into all the spiritual lights of the content of tefillin. So it was great. Yaakov was tripping out on those tefillins, at those things, as he was doing it. It was incredible. But the one thing he was missing was a pure tefillin. Yaakov would give all that away if we can just give him simply one of our pairs. Even if it's not so kosher, shema kosher, like the pure tefillin that you paid $3,000. Even if it's the one you buy in the Chabad mitzvah store, or you call Mitzvot tefillin to be able to go put on have on handy, an extra spare to be able to slap on a Jew tefillin. Yaakov would give everything he has to put on that pair of tefillin. Because his tefillin is a tefillin of light. Our tefillin is a tefillin of the substance of God. And it's only in the physical. The spiritual light was illuminating in their soul. The supernal wisdom of tefillin that was shining. Shalanu. The spiritual lights of our tefillin were shining to them. But it still can't compare to the essence of the divine wisdom. That is only enclosed in our physical tefillin boxes. For the reason we said earlier. When it gets imprinted into the material physical world, this and only this is an indication that its root is from the essence of it. When it is in its most fullest, most overflowing state. And this is the reason why to create a child, you can create it only from the physical droplet. If what you're really doing when you're creating a child is you're really scanning and summarizing your entire intelligence, and you're transmitting it into this physical through this physical droplet. So wouldn't it be much better if you're putting a bunch of brain power? So wouldn't it be better that you should go out for a few weeks thinking and meditating and come up with the most brilliant ideas you can come up with? Like really plug your mind and then take that concept and from there you create a child. Don't do that. Why? Because your most brilliant concepts won't create a child. Why? Because in those brilliant concepts are only the light of your intelligence. It's not the substance of your intelligence. The substance of your intelligence can only go into a physical something. It comes from your brain, but it's physical. And that's the semen, the seminal drop from where the child is created. Comes from the physical drop. This is much higher. In its root, even from the most refined, abstract, deepest philosophical concept that you can conjure up. Even if you exert yourself and you pull out your deepest thinking powers, it's not creating a job. And by the way, this is the difference between angels and souls. Angels are created from the spiritual lights of God, from God's brilliant thoughts. And souls are created from the droplet, from God's seminal droplet. And therefore, they're of the essence, and the angels are not of the essence. The angels are creatures of light, and the souls are pieces of the divine essence. And that's the reason why the root of souls, Shanikra Banim, are called children, Gavayim Gamim Malachim, they're higher even than angels. Elyonim, from the highest angels, Shanimshachim Ma'oirais Ta'aba Ve'ima, that come from the lights of Chachma and Bina. The Da'ala Maven is enough to those understand. So this is the summary of the three metaphors that he used to explain this. And now, he's gonna, in chapter 14, he's going to wrap it up. So now we'll understand why when Mashiach will come, we're still going to celebrate the halachas more than anything else. Now I will understand with added explanation the idea that we said earlier. The halacha is that the laws, gam la'asin, also in the future, even in that day when the mystical worlds will reveal themselves, the laws will remain hidden. Because the laws are coming from that which is hidden, even from the most hidden worlds. What's the difference between the hidden worlds and the revealed worlds? The hidden worlds are where the higher lights of God are revealed, and the concealed and the revealed world, which means what's revealed to us, our lower world, is where the lower lights of God are come down. God's dimmed lights come down. God's more undimmed light shining in heaven. God's less dimmed, more dimmed, and less brilliant lights are coming down to earth. But it's all light. It's only light. It's not the essence of it. And when Mashiach will come, the barriers between the upper and the lowers will break away, and the higher worlds will be fully revealed. And everything that was ever secret is going to be revealed. And we're going to have privy to the greatest, most brilliant lights. But it's still light. It's not the essence yet. And that's why we're still going to cherish the mitzvahs and the laws, because that's where we're touching the essence, even in the days of Mashiach. Because the laws are coming from the concealed of all concealed. It's the luminary himself. Which that's the potent power that can deal with the harshness of this world. Because it's only the halacha. It's the divine wisdom as it is applied to this world where the ultimate potency is to be found that can deal with lamata mata achshav, that is now applied in yanim gashmiyim and material physical things, because of the aforementioned reasons that we spoke earlier. The Da'ala Maven is enough to those who understand. Like love the way he keeps on throwing that. This is enough for those who understand. And now we'll also understand the question that we asked earlier. Why are we going to need this oil when Mashiach comes in the future in the Messianic world? Why are we going to need this more oil? What's the more oil? This is the laws of Torah, which we discussed. Shemen Orah, and what is that? It's called more because it goes down into the bitter worlds to separate between good and bad. The Shemen Amor the Nega. It's our ability to do a birur, to do a rectification in the world of Nega. Noga is the mixed world of good and bad. Which in order to do that, it's coming from the supernal wisdom, but not the expressed wisdom, not the luminary, not the luminous wisdom, but the wisdom as it is still in the luminary itself. That is higher than the light of the higher wisdom. And that's why this Shemen Amor has another name. It's called Shemen Lamor. It doesn't say Shemen Leheir, even though it's interesting because Shemen Lamor simply is talking about the Shemen Zayas, not the Shemen, not the spiced oil. They didn't put spiced oil in the menorah. In the menorah, they put pure olive oil. So yet he's connecting the two oils together, Shemen Hamor with Shemen Lamor. Maybe when it says Shemen Lamor, it applies to this oil as well. But in any case, it's called Shemen Lamor. What's the difference between the word Ma'or and Or? The appropriate word should have been oil for light. It doesn't say that. It says oil to be a luminary. That's the power of this oil. The power of the oil of Torah, of Shemen, of this Chachma, is that it's not a projection of God's wisdom, it's the essence of God's wisdom. And not the light. It's the essence of the emanator itself. The Chachmi Allah, the supernal wisdom, which translates very low. It comes down into the dropping of halacha and into the metaphors. The varer, in order to clean this world, its application to this world is to fix this world. The zeu shemachrizin, and that's why the announcement when any soul comes up to heaven, what's the announcement? Fortunate is Ashrei Mishabolaka. Fortunate is someone who comes to this world who's got a couple of Mesechtas under his belt. That's why we learned in today's Hayom Yom that a chassid is supposed to learn at least a Mesechta a year, a tractate of Talmud. In addition to studying Hasidism and all these mystical stuff, you have to also study the revealed part of the Torah, the laws of the Torah. So they say, fortunate are those who come over here, will be Yadai, and in his hands, Tashlim, a completion. Koyach Habirur the Kachach. This person has filled themselves with this powerful, godly, potent call it oil. That is able to do the more job, the separation. And his studying is in his hand after. It doesn't say the Kabbalah say biyada. It doesn't say Kabbalah in his hand. Talmud goes on Talmud. Which is higher than the secrets of the Torah. From the reason mentioned above. Okay, and therefore, that's why the soul needs 6 months. You have to have at least 6 months worth of Torah. 6 months in which you soaked up the Shemen Amor, before it can come to Gan Eden. And the same is even higher than Gan Eden. In the future world, you're still going to need, you're going to have to fall back on the Torah, on the physical Torah that you learned. Now he goes into parentheses. That's what it means that the laws will not be bottled. It doesn't mean, that's a very interesting thing. It doesn't mean that we're going to continue studying these laws. Because it's not going to have an application anymore. Why? Now we study them because the world is still a mixture of good and bad. And we have to separate the good from the bad. It doesn't mean that the bitter element of these halachas will continue on. So the rabbi is going to need to know the laws in order to say impure, pure. No. Sharei, why? Isa bereya mehem. Now we turn over the page. It says in Zohar, stated in the back of Tanya, in the letters in the back of Tanya, the compilation of letters in the back of Tanya. So he's over there in the Zohar, it says the Ilana the Toivera, that when Mashiach comes, we're not going to be under the influence of the tree of knowledge of good and bad, which means we're not going to be affected anymore of the mixture of evil. And therefore it says over there, which is because we're under the influence of the tree of knowledge of good and bad, for that reason we need to learn the Torah that applies, which also comes from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. You have to learn the revealed part of the Torah, which combs out the good from the bad in this world. The Toivera, kosher u'pasal, what is kosher and what is pasal, what is invalid, tameh, what is ritually impure, tahar, what is ritually pure. All of that is aber ma'alma. It's going to be removed from the world. So it says clearly that part of the Torah is going to be deactivated. And this is going to be in the future. After we finish this combing the klipas noga, after we finish this purification process, which we do through the Torah study that we do for a few millennia of Torah study. So after klipas noga is completely fixed, like it says, that the spirit of impurity God is going to remove from the earth. These things won't be applicable anymore. Klal. These things won't even be here because they're connected to klipos. The klipos won't be here. The shells and all. What does it mean? No. At that time, the laws will remain. What's going to remain is the divine investment of the essence of God that's in this law is going to be there. So it's almost like the seminal drop isn't here anymore, but the child is still. It's like the inside of it, what was really counted, that's forever going to be. But that's not coming from the mystical secrets. That's coming from only from the physical element of the halacha. That's what's giving you this depth, this inner essence of chachmei. The cloud, the intention is of the supernal wisdom, hagnuza, that is concealed by Allah in these laws. Shesharsham, they're rooted ba'atzmus amar the chachmei. They're rooted in the essence of the luminary of the supernal wisdom. As we said earlier. An example to that. We know that in Gan Eden, sometimes the sages say that in the yeshiva of Gan Eden is the world of paradise, which is a world of souls. Sometimes the sages tell us that in Gan Eden, we know Gan Eden has academies, has yeshivas where they study. And what do they study? They study the laws of Torah. So the Talmud, for instance, says that there was a debate happening between Hashem and the whole Beis Din above whether regarding a leprosy, a nega, when a person gets a discoloring of their skin, which causes a ritual impurity. So just the discoloring itself does not create the impurity. There has to be certain signs that if it also has these signs, they deem it impure. One of those signs is that the hair that's inside that spot, inside that white spot, the hair turned white. You have to have at least two hair that turned white. Instead of it being regular natural color hair, they become a white hair. If the hair became white, inside this white blotch of skin, that's a sign of a spiritual infection, and the person is deemed impure, and they get sent out of the camp. It's the whole story. So the Talmud has a question. The Talmud says, usually the Talmud talks about the debates of the rabbis down here. At a certain moment, the Talmud gives you a little bit of a... The Talmud says, in the heavenly academy, there's an argument. What's the argument? They're arguing if a person he sees on his body that a certain part of his body, the hair on the body became white. There's no white blotch of skin, just the hair turned white for a week. And then a week later is when the nega appears. It becomes white on the outside. Do we say that that's impure? Because now you have both. You have a white blotch, and inside of it, you also have the white hair. Or does it have to be in that order? First, you have the white blotch, and then the hair that is in the white blotch, after a few hours or whatever it is, converts and switches colors into white. And only then is it tamei. So it said that they had an argument in this heavenly academy, this and this. God said one thing, and the whole yeshiva argued with Hashem. They said, where are we going to find out? Let's go to. So they went to check with the rabbi that was alive down here. They went to ask Rabbi Bar Nachman. Rabbi Bar Nachman was here, and they asked him, what do you say? I think he sided with God. But the Rambam, I think, accepts the law not like it's as Hashem said, but like the Beis Shabbat. So there's a whole discussion about this whole thing. We learned a lot of Hasidus about it. The Alter Rebbe has pages and pages of Hasidus of this whole concept. So the question is, when they're studying, instead of them just learning abstract Kabbalah, they're actually addressing this idea. But there's no blotches, there's no hair, there's no physicality there. So how are they addressing the law? So let's see what he says. I forgot it already. When I prepared this, I looked at this and I forgot it already by now. Like the laws that they study in Gan Eden. If the white blotch comes before the white hair, in Gan Eden, which means in paradise, there are no white blotches on skin because there's no bodies there. And there's no white hair, klal at all. So they're not, it seems like they're not, when they're discussing it, they're discussing the divine concept that's in it. But if you're just discussing divine concepts, why can't you discuss divine concepts regarding Sephirot, attributes? Why do you have to discuss the divine concept of a Torah law down here that applies? The answer is because the potency of the divine law is much higher than any mystical concept above. But the supernal wisdom that's in it, is much greater. There's a little tricky language over here. So what are they learning over there? When they're discussing the question, talking about leprosy and I'm beginning to itch. When they're discussing the question, what are they discussing? Were they discussing Kabbalah? Meaning the Kabbalistic secrets of this thing, or were they discussing the physical as it applies to our world? You see, every law also has its spiritual meaning in the higher world. The Kabbalah of the law. Every law, you can discuss this law in Kabbalistic terminology. But they choose not to learn it, to study it in Kabbalistic terminology. They're discussing it as it's discussed in this world. Even though these things are not applicable. Why would you study it? Because the wisdom of the divine, the essence, is in its physical manifestation more than it is in the spiritual. So it's interesting. So that would seem to imply that we're still going to learn, even after Mashiach comes and we don't need the laws in order to purify, we're still going to reread these laws and learn them the whole time because we're going to be fetching the wisdom of the divine that's in these laws. So exactly what that means, I don't know exactly. But it seems like the halachas are not going to be batal, means the very same book of Rambam that you're learning is available, is going to endure into Mashiach days, and we're going to study it. Although it's not needed anymore for its separation quality, for its pure purging and filtering quality, something like that. With all this, we'll understand when we say Megillas Esther will not be canceled in the future. So he says, now here we're going to see something. He's going to add another little something. Very, very, very special idea. So now we have like two separate things that are rooted in God's essence. The story of Purim and the Megillah and the Torah. Is there a connection between the two? We say that's called Mordechai. Fine. But is the connection between the story of Purim? Yeah, the story of Purim was also a story that was very physical. A godly story that manifested in the very, 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 very much in the physicality of the world. That means Passover was also a physical story. The sea split. The Egyptians got pimples, right? And water turned to blood. So it happened in the physical world. Very much. Yes. But extraordinary things happen in the physical world. Meaning, nature was shattered, and things that abnormal things happen. That means that God comes down in this world, but God doesn't enter into the world. He comes down on top of the world and does his godly things above the world. And that's what disrupts the world. But with the story of Megillah Esther, it was God inserting himself into the material physical world. Because nothing out of the natural order occurred. Nothing. There was not one miracle. And yet everything was a miracle. There was a party and Achashverosh got drunk, which is normal. And he made a beauty contest at the party, which is normal for those, when he wanted to show off his wife in a non-modest way. And then she doesn't want to come, which was also normal, especially if she got a tail. Okay, that was the abnormal part. But that's not in the Megillah. That's the Midrash already. And then what happens? He gets angry and he kills her because she doesn't listen. When he's drunk, normal. Then he does a beauty contest. Okay, from all the girls, he couldn't have picked anyone but Esther, which is quite shocking. Okay, but he's got to pick someone. She won. So he picked her. And then she pleads for her nation. What's so abnormal? Mordechai overhears a assassination plot. And he tells the king, it's the sequence of the events. It's all of these coming together at the right moment, at the right time, perfectly. So what's going on? God has slipped himself completely into the natural. It's similar to the Torah, the physical Torah that comes down into this world, as opposed to one that remains spiritual and aloof. So that's the connection between the story of Megillah Esther and Purim. The fact that the Megillah Esther, and in a sense you might look at it as, just like this part of Torah, we might want to dismiss it as being inferior to the more brighter parts of the Torah, the more luminous part of the Torah. And now we're learning, no, that precisely because it's camouflaged in the physical, it's the most potent part of the Torah. The same is also regarding miracles. We might want to dismiss the miracle of Esther as like a very second-class, second-rated miracle. Come on, you can't compare it to Mitzrayim or to Yeshua stopping the sun and bringing the people into the land of Israel, doing really spectacular, crazy stuff. This is okay. It's a miracle for exile. It's a miracle. And we're learning, no. Actually, the miracle that is the most enclosed in nature is the most potent of miracles, coming from the divine essence. Is enclosed the most in nature. Esther. It's all based on Achashverosh, who loved Esther, fell in love with her. And the whole story, Kidu, as it is known. But on the contrary, from this, that the miracle was so camouflaged and so enclosed in nature, moving it's understood that the root of this miracle, where it's stemming from, coming from a very hard place. It's coming from a place above all other miracles. This is called wonders. On the miracles like the resurrection, when dead people will come alive, it's an awesome miracle where the lights of God are so openly displayed, shattering nature completely. They're not coming from such a high place like the miracle of Esther. They're coming from the concealed world. That's going to be revealed. But when it is enclosed in nature, you are God that hides. This is even higher than even than the spectacular wonders. From the concealed, the whole concealed. And this is what we said earlier. God says, Esther Panai, I'm going to hide my face, which means I'm going to be bringing forth my face from the deepest hidden place. Even from the hidden world, even from the hidden day. The story of Esther is even higher than the resurrection, and the miracle of the resurrection of the future. From the reason mentioned above, and like the light of a big blaze that goes very far. God can come all the way down to a faraway place. What's the faraway place? The natural world. And also like the example of the full barrel, which spills over, and it goes outside, canal. And that's the reason why we say regarding Purim, Purim and the days of Purim will never ever be removed from the Jewish people. The miracle of Purim will be greater than all miracles. The Einoi Bittul Klal, it will never be canceled. It will never be sidestepped. It will never be dismissed. If it's higher than the lights, it's the luminary itself. That has no nullification, never stops the Maven. And we are going to learn just one small little more piece over here. Whoever needs to go already is dismissed. But one small more piece for another 15 minutes. And this is the meaning of the Kibbutz Yehudim. Now we'll understand why the story of Purim is a re-acceptance of the Torah. And it brought down, remember, as we discussed at the beginning of this, it gave us back God's garment. Whatever was revealed by the giving of the Torah was revealed again by Purim. Because by the Torah, what did we get? The physical mitzvahs. So this is similar to the giving of the Torah, but even deeper than it was then. We completed then what we started at the giving of the Torah. Amar Razal, the sages say, Torah, that which we began at the time of the giving of the Torah. The Achshal b'mei Mordechai and Esther, and now in the days of Mordechai and Esther, this was considered the completion, the sealing of the deal. As we said earlier. So first he's going to explain what was it at the time of the giving of the Torah that merited that we should go so deep into the divine essence. He said earlier, remember that the forefathers before the giving of the Torah, they only had the lights. That's why they had a spiritual Torah. What was it? It was the degree of how deeply we opened ourselves up to God. The rule over here is as follows. God always responds to us the way we reach out for him. It's always measure for measure. It's like God is our shadow. Just like your shadow mimics you exactly, God mimics us. When we are attracted to God's lights, when we are attracted to when we seek a divine experience, then we remain in the realm of experience, which is the realm of lights, illuminations, and so forth. By the giving of the Torah, we weren't seeking a spiritual experience. When we stood at Sinai, we said we will do and we will hear. The concept to say that we will do means commitment. What kind of commitment? The commitment of our essence. Why? Because if you're not giving your entire self, how can you commit to something you have no idea? You see, if there's a measure to your commitment, if your commitment has a measure, which means, I'm sure you have nice things that you'd like of us, we're willing to do it. But then I first have to hear. I'll filter. I'll decide what I can commit to, what I can't commit to. But if I'm not giving you If I'm not in it, something, if I'm taking my entire being and giving it over, then it doesn't make a difference. I gave you myself. As we gave God ourselves, God gave us Himself. So God didn't give us His knowledge. He gave us His brain, from where all His knowledge comes from. He gave us the substance of His mind, not the ideas of His mind. Because we gave Him the substance of our being. Had the Jews said, "We will hear and we will do," that means I will hear first. I will decide. That means I'm keeping something of myself for myself. And I'll probably commit to quite a lot, but there is somewhat of a reason, a logic, an explanation. It's not total giving over. It would never have done it. And Purim, we're going to see they had a similar type of a complete laying themselves down in front of God, giving their entire selves over. In that sense, it's both equal, and that's why it triggered a response of God's essence. In order that the symbol of the Jewish souls should be able to receive such a high light, that its root, the P'chinas Atzmus Amor, is in the essence of the luminary, she'ein lo bitul klal, that has no nullification, that exists forever and ever, that even in the days of Mashiach it will be, and forever, ever. The Inyan Megillas Esther, as we discussed earlier, like something like we explained regarding Megillas Esther and the laws of the Torah. The Inyan Halachos and the power of the laws of the Torah. Shehem P'chinas Mordechai, which they are Mordechai. So Mordechai and Esther, which is really both these elements. Esther is the Purim story, and Mordechai is the Shavuot story, the Torah story. For this, they needed to have a good preparation. And what was their preparation? They had to condition themselves for that kind of thing. And this is at the time that the Jewish people said at the time of the giving of the Torah, Nasa v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. And this is the meaning, as the Sharei lasses, that on Purim as well, they finished what they started doing then. By the time of the giving of the Torah, they began activating such a high light. They started to touch this very, very, very lofty level. So now in the time of Mordechai and Esther, they were fully completed what they began. In other words, they firmly solidified what they were dabbling in by the time of the beginning of the Torah, they were touching that commitment. They were somewhat flashing to God their essence, but they didn't really break it in. By the story of Esther, they fully grew into their shoes. They grew into that role, into that commitment. That this light should be able to come in a revelation, even if it's so hidden in the ways of nature, like we said earlier. The Inyan and the idea is what was so great by the giving of the Torah. That's explained earlier at great length. At the time when Israel said, "Let us do and we will hear," it says when the Jews said Nasa v'nishma, they created God's crown. They made him a crown for his head. Which it says his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding. And in order for them to touch the crown, it's only because they said, "We will do and we will hear." First do and then hear. Because what does do mean? And they said, "We will do." They canceled their entire will. They gave God their entire will. It's not that He did His will. They gave Him their will. And what does that mean? I'm not accepting your desires, God. I'm I'm accepting you. I'm committing myself to you for whatever you will. That means you see, if you connect yourself to the will, then each will, you have to commit to yourself to this will and that want and that want. But if I say to you, I don't have to even hear what you want. I am yours. And when a person becomes a servant to someone else, when it comes to a job, I'll give you a perfect example. When a person comes to a job, and so both employer and employee have to agree to the job. So what does employee need to know? If you have some leverage, if the guy's dying for a job, okay, he'll take anything. But if you have your options, you have 10 different companies that are really going after you, and you're really so you sit with the company and you say, what is expected of me, and you commit yourself to based on what you want to commit yourself. You say, no, I don't want to do that. That means that okay, you know what? You don't have to do it. It means your commitment is to the certain expectations or certain wants, but not to the. But when a person goes on a slave market and he picks up a slave, you're not committing yourself. He doesn't have to have an interview with you and tell you what he's going to ask you. You belong to him, not to his desires. Whatever will come from his mind to ask. The commitment is not to the desire. The commitment is to the one who's desiring. That's the point. You're subservient to the one that desires, to the person himself. Desire is already expression. The pre-desire. That's the idea. Canal Sharei. Amru Nasek. And because they said we will do. Masha Yigzir whatever he was going to ask for. Terem Shashamu Aratzah, before they even heard the will. This is completely beyond reason. If this commitment would have been mixed with some kind of a reasonability, they should have first requested. They should know to what they are surrendering their will. But the fact that they didn't ask, this is a sign that they committed themselves essence to essence. Higher than desire that is mixed with reason. It's because they committed themselves to the willer of the will. From where all will comes from. They didn't commit to the will. That is already revealed. We will do. Then we will hear. Well, when you'll express a will, we will hear what the will is. We will do it because we already told you we're doing it. Then, once the doing is a nullification to the will of the will, and the hearing is accepting the will itself. You have to listen to what the will is. So you have to commit yourself to that will as well. But the root of the commitment to the will is coming from a much deeper commitment, an earlier commitment, a higher commitment, a far more essential commitment, which means you're giving yourself over to the place from where the will comes from, which is the very you yourself. And that, in this case, to God himself. Nullify your will before when it says in Pirkei Avot, in the ethics of the fathers, it says nullify your will to his will is a lower level. Because here you have a situation, he has a will, you have your will, and the wills are clashing. So you surrender to the will, but you're surrendering to the will. But by the giving of the Torah, they went much deeper than that. They didn't surrender to the will. And it wasn't even that they knew beforehand that they're going to get 613. And they said 613. Well, if it would have been 614, no way. But 613, we can handle it. Let's discuss. That's not what happened. If it would have been, 8,479 commandments, it would have been the same. It's whatever. And the truth is, it's not 630. It's a few million commandments. By the time you're done with all the rabbinic ordinances and details and sub-details and sub-details, if you're choosing to live a godly life of Torah, it's you have nothing left over for yourself. You've given your entire existence over. There's no self. That's what God wants. And when we give him that, he gives us himself. He says, the commitment to the will, that's the mitzvahs on their own. Remember, we learned the garments, the mitzvahs is called the garment of the king. But we learned there was the crown of the king. We learned that that's when you do the mitzvah. You say, and you're doing the mitzvah because God said you to do the mitzvah. It's that moment that reaches into the crown, going back to the first and second class, mainly the second class, when we learned about the crown. That's Keser, that's even higher. And that's why when they said Nasav and Ishma, they got the crowns. The mitzvahs on their own, mitzvah atzman. The mitzvahs are the will of God. So let me put it this way. A person could be committed to all 613 commandments and not be Jewish. Because they made a separate commitment. Well, I can do the Yisro. On Sukkot, not a problem. How much does it cost? For $70, you can get a nice set of it. I can have it. What else? Sit in the sukkah? I can do that. You don't like milk and meat? Okay, I can do that. Once a week you need me to rest? I can do that. You can accept every single mitzvah on your own and be committed to all 613. And that's awesome. You have all of God's will. You're connecting to the level of Keter, which is the will. Not the Keser, you're led to the external, the lights of Keser. God's will. You're full of godly things, godly programs. You don't have God himself. What does it mean to be a Jew? To be one with God himself. You have to be able to say to God, pile it up, whatever you want. 613. How much more? For sure. Anything. The point over here is anything. So he says, the mitzvahs on their own, they're called 613 pathways. The Zion mitzvahs derabanan, together with the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs, shehen tarach amudei or. Together they're 620, which spell the word keter. They're 620 pillars of light. But when you fulfill the mitzvahs on a deeper level, it's not a reason. It's not I like this mitzvah. I like that mitzvah. I can conform with this mitzvah. But you give yourself over completely. Over there you arrive above into a level of keser shebekesser, of the crown of the crown. Shanikra atara al gabe arosh. That's called the crown amen. See, the mitzvahs of the skull, the mitzvahs without, but this type of a commitment is the crown above the skull. God says, it's a pleasure in front of me that my will was done. This pleasure is in front of his essence. We do his will. It doesn't say you did this will or did that, his will. The fact that you committed yourself to anything he will want. And this is the meaning, going back to the Megillah, the crown that the king wore during his coronation. And that's Keser Malchus the Ein Sof. The Keter of the Malchus of the Ein Sof. Like we discussed earlier. The Al came is this that the people said we will do. This was their great preparation. For the revelation of the light of the essence, that's called hidden from all hidden, which is then going to reveal itself by Israel. Because they made him, they stimulated in God such a lofty, essential level, this level was downloaded to them as well. The Matan Torah by Matan Torah. But by the giving of the Torah, they only slightly brushed on this commitment because they didn't really practically. They made the commitment, but they didn't do it in the literal sense. But when they willing to die, all the entire Jewish people for an entire year as Jews and not forsake their Judaism, even when things got tough, that was when they put their money where their mouth is. They actually did it. So by the giving, they actually did. In other words, what they committed to by the giving of the Torah, they displayed on Purim. So that's why Purim was the completion of it. This was the conclusion of the acceptance. The Orah Gadol Zeh Atzmai, the very same light of Shavuot, of the giving of the Torah. Lamata b'Knesset Yisrael. This was received by Israel down here below on Purim. The Daila Maven, it is enough to those who understand. Now we learned 15 chapters, and I want to finish still up next week. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. So we're not going to finish all next week. We might have to do 2 more classes leading up to Pesach with this Purim minor. But why not? Well, the part that we're going to learn tomorrow is the one part that we didn't bring in over here is what's with the horse. It says, bring the garment, bring the crown, and the horse that the king was riding. So in the next week's class is going to discuss all the concept of what the horse is. And then we're going to have to understand why the horse is given over to Haman. What's Haman got involved? What is he doing with it? How does he get involved in this whole situation, which seems to be the loftiest of the loftiest, the holiest of the holy, and he is the wicked Haman, as we shall see. Now go home and do Rambam.